Welcome to ETStudios, coming to you from Goa ETCIO Annual Conclave 2024. My name is Muqbil Ahmed. I'm the executive editor at ETCIO and the host and the moderator for this session. Now, the topic for today's discussion is enhance security, protect data, and mitigate cyber risk with zero trust exchange. And to discuss all this, we have among us two very senior technology leaders, Ramesh Lakshminarayanan, CIO, HDFC Bank, and Ananth Nag, Area Vice President, Zscaler, India. Welcome to the show, gentlemen. How are you doing?
Thank you, Mubil. Appreciate ET bringing us all together. I met a lot of leaders, people who are in the hot seat. It's been a very interesting conversation for the last 24 hours. Thank you for bringing us together. Appreciate it.
Wonderful. Going to you first, Ramesh. So we see that, the technology landscape has really evolved with the uh, coming of new technologies, enterprises trying to digitize as much as possible. So there is a case of hyper digitalization which is going on. How do you see this rapidly evolving tech landscape?
Thanks, Mubir, for the question. I think it's a great question. Uh, the way we see this, the digitalization story is still playing out. I mean, we started in the late 2000s with the Aadhaar, and then the Jam Trinity came, then came the UPI, and then the DPI infrastructure has come along. So you're seeing a lot of digitalization happening in the banking world. Uh, but there are different colors to it today. So if you look at it, it's not that everybody will come and do an unassisted digital journey, completely
True,
without an
absolutely.
aid. So I think the way we see that it's yet to play out. For example, things like how much you leverage the DPI infrastructure. Can you make assisted far better? What kind of complex products that you can bring on digital, acquisition? So all of that is currently playing out. So to my mind, I think it's still a story that's kind of playing out. A lot of technologies getting into that today. For example, if I had to explain to you things like DPI usage, hyper personalization, pre-filling in a very large way of customer forms, and then the entire experience, the friction around it. We're trying to kind of minimize that. So I think it's a journey in progress. So there will be multiple buckets. There will be the urban, middle class, target. There could be the Gen Z target. There could be a rural, and that could be an SME loan on a rural. So each of these segments have to be looked differently when it comes to the digitalization, and that's how we are looking at this entire story rather than looking at it from one lens actually.
Right. No, I totally agree with you that there is a need for hyper digitalization and it is driven by several needs. For example, you spoke about the need for hyper personalization, which is what would take enterprises to the next level of digitalization. So, and this also includes not only digitalization but the adoption of several new technologies. So, in this context, what I want to ask you is that do you think this rapid pace of digitalization is leading to some kind of a compromise on the side of security? Because we see, I mean, if one were to go through newspapers or media reports every day, there is some kind of a data breach or a cyber attack happening every day. In fact, sometimes twice a day, thrice a day. So that number is becoming kind of astronomical. So, how do you think? Do you think that there is a trade off between this trajectory of digitalization vis-a-vis the security posture of organizations? What are your initial thoughts on that?
So look, I think it is, back in the non-digitalized era, it is not that the frauds were not there. It's just that the form of the fraud, the form of security compromises changed. So the way we see is that there are two aspects to this. One that is controllable security, which is in your control, whether it's data, ensuring that the data doesn't leak, encryption standards, zero trust architecture, putting a lot of security apparatus, machine learning on security operations, all of that stuff to play out, and say how do you fortify your perimeter, so to say. And when I talk about assume a bank like ours, how do they fortify? Second is how do they do reconnaissance, which means you don't wait for the attacks to come to your fort. You rather actually get into the outer world, because today's world is very different. I mean, there's dark web, there is a lot of stuff that's
True,
that's
true.
out in the market. how do you know what's happening in this ecosystem proactively, right? So that's the second part of the discussion. These are still controllable. So as technology sophistication happens, both the fortification will also happen, and the sophistication of the attacks will also go up. So it's like a balancing act that goes up. What is non-controllable? I think we have also have to focus on that, which is a lot of social engineering that happens. So today, if you see a lot of play out in India, and I'm sure it's a fairly high number, it's on account of the social engineering aspects. Basically lottery schemes, getting richer quickly, or some kind of reward points coming through, and actually customers, getting lured into it. Senior citizens are very, very big target attack. And that is the tougher part, because while you do all the fortification with security tools, there is no tool that can help you to do social engineering. You can only keep educating. So I do think that while we do all of that, we also have to focus on that aspect as to how do we communicate to our customers very, very, it looks very trivial, but it's a very tough job to do.
I know. And I would like to add that there is no fortification against human greed. I mean, and you gave an excellent example about social engineering and the kind of attacks which are happening, and also how you bifurcated it between, controllable security and things which are beyond your control, which would include social engineering. So, Ramesh, you come from one of the largest, private sector banks. I mean, huge mammoth organization. This question pertains to that aspect. So there are other banks also which have been, traditional banks, huge infrastructure. Now, do you think that, since they are traditional, they have a lot of legacy systems, and it's very difficult, it's understandable also. I mean, the heavier the animal, agility goes for a toss. So in that context, do you think legacy systems would or do pose a challenge, particularly for organizations, because everyone is trying to make efforts at digitalization and they are in some stage. So there will always be the existence of some of these legacy systems. Do you think they hamper, the security posture of organizations?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, Mugbir. I think probably first time actually answering this question, so it's very interesting. I think the way to look at legacy, the definition also has to be very watertight in that sense, right? But at a very high level, I would say yes. And why am I saying that? Because legacy systems carry a lot of vulnerability.
True.
Deprecated technologies, obsolete technologies, technologies which are not in that sense running. They bring in a lot of unknown, vulnerabilities, so to say, or even known vulnerabilities. Just kind of patching them and kind of ensuring that the systems are safe and secure is a challenge. And there is also this myth that if you are on-prem, that you are more secure, and then if you are on cloud, you are less secure. I think we moved away from that. That was probably there for a few years back. So today, the way I see that the legacy application, unless you really kind of balance the modernization story, and it's going to be with every bank. This is a question that's there in the industry.
True.
That what do you do, because you started 30 years back on core banking, and that core banking continues to be the same application. You started with many other applications like that. So the CIOs have this job of doing that, what I call the ring fencing of the legacy, but at the same time transitioning to the modern platforms. And that balance is not easy, because it also depends on various factors like the size of the bank, or how much ability that you have to kind of invest into modern technologies. So if you look at it in an overall situation, you will have to have two-pronged strategy. So while you build the new, you build it with a technology that's probably still going to survive for next 15 years, but you also fortify or ring fence the legacy platforms. And there are techniques today, like as I said, clearly to me, things like micro-segmentation today, for example, are clearly kind of things that you could do with legacy platforms. You're kind of islanding the legacy platforms. You're not allowing the attacks to go horizontal.
Right.
So some of those have to be implemented even on the legacy platform. So mix. You focus on legacy and how much you can fortify, while also being very careful that you have to transition at some point of time. And that's not an easy balance, actually.
True. So do you think that it should be, do you think it should be done away with completely?
No, it's not easy.
But it's not easy.
It's not easy because look, every bank will have its own journey from a
True.
modernization. For example, a bank of our size, if I had to do a core banking replacement today, it will probably have 5 years, and that 5 years, by the time the technology shifts so much, so you will have to do different
It's
techniques.
always a catch-up.
Yeah. So, for example, each CIO has to have, or the each of the organization has to have their own strategy. So we, for example, focus a lot on saying, okay, how do I kind of pull out systems, from larger legacy applications rather than completely replacing. So
Right.
we have techniques like following the application. We have techniques like insulation layer, which allows both applications to coexist.
Coexist.
So I think it's a kind of a strategy that one has to develop, but it's not going to go in a hurry. My own sense is that by the time you modernize, again you will catch up. So which is why I think a strategy that's allowing you to balance, and how does the ratio stay? If the ratio, let's say an 80-20 towards legacy, or a 50-50 or a 70-30 over a period of 5 years, you need to have those strategies in place.
Right. That's a very interesting observation, Ramesh. And this is where I would like to pull you in, Ananth. So, Ramesh is of the view that for very large organizations, it's very understandable, this point of view, this perspective, that they will have to coexist at some level. And what enterprises can do is try and fortify those legacy systems. Your views on it. And also, if you could touch up that, does this necessitate a relook at cybersecurity today?
I think, Mukul, very good question. I agree with Ramesh. It's a journey. If you look at the architectures that have been built, they've been built over the last 30 years. And these architectures will continue to be there for the next 10, 15 years. And like Ramesh said, it's a journey that you have to keep evolving. You have to build strategies to modernize that architecture. The reason it is this constant change to modernize will always be there because the expectation of the consumers will continue to change. The expectations of the organizations will continue to change. As the expectations and the bar gets raised, the opportunity to modernize, the opportunity to change is always going to be an imperative. It will always be a driver. And that is one of the fundamental reasons why Zscaler came into existence, which is basically we rewrote the way infrastructures are built, how connectivity is built. And that's the fundamental reason basis which the word coined around zero trust is built, which is how do you allow basically fundamentally a user, a machine, or a workload to connect to a destination, and how do you do it securely? The infrastructure that is built, which is so-called legacy, there's nothing wrong in it. It's just that it has been built over the last 30 years, and today the expectations out of that infrastructure is hampering the growth, which is, can I be more agile? Can I onboard more factories? Can I onboard more branches? How do you do that agile and faster so that I can impact bottom line and top line? That's where we believe that there's an opportunity for us to build a new journey over the next 10, 15 years to modernize this infrastructure.
Right. It's very interesting that you made this reference to zero trust. So, Ramesh, we have seen over the past few years, various frameworks come up. Zero trust is also one of them and highly talked about. So, when you are discussing cybersecurity in your organization, what are the various frameworks that you look at? How do you assess them? What goes on there?
So I think zero trust is, first of all, it's not a new terminology. I want to be very clear about it. It's been there for long. Uh, Part of the defense techniques that we've been kind of configuring. When you look at the modern ecosystem, the zero trust takes center stage simply because the attack surface has become so wide.
Huge.
And then your ability to just one thing is very clear. First of all, my personal view is security actually starts at the engineering level, at the coding level. So
True.
a lot of us have to focus, first of all, to go back and make the code secure while you're developing, because that's the foundation. And a lot of times banks do not even have visibility to that code because it's being developed by a third party.
True.
So I think the battle starts from this. So when we look at our security framework, I start from there. So the DevSecOps is not merely a matter that comes into the bank and then you do security on top of it, but it starts actually could be outside your ecosystem, and then you still have to figure out how that particular
Start from scratch.
it starts
Security by design.
yeah, just imagine a third party developing your software, talking about all zero trust, but if the code is coming with a fundamental vulnerability, look, whatever intelligence you can build, there would be something that will slip through. Okay, that is the reality. I mean, if the coder decides to define a variable as a global versus a local, I'm just giving simple example, you will have problems. Okay, even the most intelligent OpenAI framework won't be able to find that. I can tell you that. Okay, but once it comes into the bank's structure, then obviously you start applying a lot of methodologies. Like you said, it starts with basically looking at the code and the security of the code. So the SaaS, the DAST frameworks, and all of that stuff comes into the picture in terms of how you're looking at the code. Then of course you get into the production per se, right? Now the application is there, it's live. Now you have to protect it constantly. So there again, like the zero trust architecture kicks in again when you look at things like definitely micro segmentation. You look at a lot of intrusion prevention. You look at it starts again from WAF, and it again starts coming all the way down from perimeter, to look at firewalls, then look at intrusion protection, and then kind of looking at the micro segmentation. And there itself, today the world has changed because, you're kind of moving away from a blacklisting to a whitelisting kind of an approach today. And that's one of the things that's kind of from the private network kind of a thought process that's coming through, where you're saying you allow only what you know. You will. It's a bit like what Jay from Zscaler kind of talks about very well, is that you are actually getting a visitor into your office, but you're not allowing him to go into any floor. You're allowing him to go to the room where he wants to do the meeting and go back. That is the zero trust architecture that's kind of coming through today. So every customer who's coming into your ecosystem, you're leading him to what he's supposed to do. Once he's done, you're allowing him to go out and then exit. And that's when this whole zero trust architecture kicks in. And that's how we look at this whole
No, I totally agree with you. And that's an excellent analogy. I mean, which would suit you the best. So, Ramesh, you have spoken about a lot of very interesting ideas and perspectives. You spoke about DevSecOps. You spoke about the need for security by design. I mean, it has to start at the level of development, when codes are being written. And it cannot be an afterthought. An excellent point. And you also referenced to the fact that today there exists an ecosystem, as you said, that there could be a piece of code that you didn't develop. It came from some third parties, and you have no idea what vulnerabilities they contain. So that's a very holistic look at security and the kind of frameworks that we have currently. And of course, zero trust is the reigning one. In fact, a few months back, I had an opportunity to interact with the creator of this zero trust framework, and he was also telling me that it's something that has to be, that must be aligned to an enterprise's, architecture today. Your views on this, Ananth? How do you see the entire zero trust framework? I mean, today is the most popular framework that is being discussed across the world as far as cybersecurity is concerned. And how do you see it panning out? Does it align to people's vision or the way they function?
Mukbil, if you walk back in time, is basically you built a network to allow users to connect to an application to deliver a service, run a bank, run a factory, manage a retail outlet. That's the fundamentals of business. Now, this infrastructure was built with complete trust. But fast forward to COVID, what changed was enterprises started to get distributed. The distributed enterprises were built because of the change in customer expectations. Expectations of enterprises also changed because you had to be more agile, consumer expectations were changing, and you had to still deliver bottom line and top line. With this context in mind, way back in 2008, we envisaged this world to be alive with two hypotheses, which is applications are going to get distributed like Ramesh shared, saying that applications are going to go away from your data center into SaaS and into hybrid clouds.
True.
Users with 5G coming in, 5G coming in, we hypothesized that users are going to also get distributed. With users getting distributed on the south side, and applications getting distributed on the north side, the enterprises had to become more agile. And while you become agile, you also had to take care of security. And that's where this concept was built, where we help a user connect to an application securely, eliminating the, or I don't eliminate, but we reduce attack surface substantially. We allow a user to connect to a destination basis identity with minimal trust. Zero trust is very hard to
True. Very hard to
live
align
by.
to. I mean,
It's with minimal
that in
trust
itself is
we
a task.
it's with minimal trust we allow user to connect to an application, and that's the foundations
true,
on
true,
which
true.
we were built.
Absolutely.
And that is what we've been able
No,
to deliver.
it's very interesting that you make this reference once again to several facts that we live in a distributed world, and you also, talked about it, how the number of devices have exploded. There is no perimeter as we speak today. It's a perimeterless world, and to secure that is quite a task. I think zero trust does give you that kind of a basic alignment, a basic framework on which to really try and align your an enterprise's architecture and the way they function. uh, Going on to so we have been talking about various frameworks. And so, Ananth, to your mind, what would be some of the essential ingredients that enterprises would need in order to erect that robust cybersecurity structure? We have spoken about the fact that the attack surface has simply exploded. I mean, it's everywhere with so many devices, so many networks. It's just a question of explosion. Your views on that?
Mukul, it aligns back to the fundamentals, which is people, process, and technology. Those fundamentals do not change. Ramesh was mentioning, how do you make security as part of the imbibed at the code
Security
level
by
itself.
design, of course.
Security by design, right? So modernization is not going to stop. Modernization will continue. But while you modernize, how do you make sure people also align to that modernization? How do you align processes to that modernization? And fundamentally, technology is a much wider scope. We have, as partners, we have a big responsibility to deliver this to organizations. We alone can't do it. It's an ecosystem that we have to work with, because every customer scenario is very, very different. How do you make sure that we attach ourselves or align ourselves to the most important objective of organizations? For example, in HDFC, their core objective is to deliver services to the millions and millions of Indians across all the regions. How do you make sure that we align and deliver to that objective? And we can't do it alone. We have to work with partners. We have to work with ecosystem, and that is a responsibility that we carry. Fundamentally, to your question, is it aligns back to people, technology, and process.
People, process, and technology. Of course, the three pillars of success for any enterprise. Now we come to the end of this discussion, but before we go, parting words from you, Ramesh. I mean, coming from the largest private sector bank, huge infrastructure, huge number of customers, and you spoke about the diverse threat landscape, the fact that there is an explosion in devices, that we live in a very distributed world. You spoke about the fact that there is an ecosystem which is very difficult to secure. In the context of all of that, last 30 seconds, your thoughts on what is the best way forward for enterprises in such a situation, particularly large ones?
Yeah, I mean, we alluded to that in my earlier discussion. Getting the balance right in terms of security, like I said, from a design perspective, is very clear thought. Then once, of course, on the perimeter side, you continue to focus on zero trust and kind of all the times look at it. Then I also spoke about how do you actually look at the perimeter. The perimeter is not what comes into you, but you have to kind of go out and seek the perimeter, right? So that's the important one. But I also see a lot of changes, because I think API, for example, is a very different animal when it comes to security, and I see banks kind of have to be very, very focused on API security. I think quantum is kind of lurking. I don't think we are yet there, but I think we should have to start
Getting there.
protecting ourselves
True.
from that. There will always be this argument that quantum threats will also be countered by quantum compute. But I think at the end of the day, you have opportunity to get ready early in some of these areas, if you ask me.
Right.
And of course, SaaS as a cloud is the third aspect, because like you're not owning, you're kind of running it from outside.
From
so how do you
outside.
look at that framework? So these are the three, at a large level, 3 or 4 things that I see from my perspective, that we have to be very, very cognizant of.
You have covered huge areas. I mean, that could be the subject of the next discussion and the next session. Of course, I mean, cloud in itself is a huge, huge area that needs a lot of, lot of fine tuning, a fresh relook at security. And thanks for pointing that out. And I think you have summed it up brilliantly. It's all about balance. So is life. Cybersecurity is no different. And it's all about creating that fine balance between the systems you have, the vision, the mission, the new systems that you are going transiting to. So I think that's a great way of putting all of that together. And thank you, gentlemen, for having this discussion. And we've discussed a lot of very pertinent points. I mean, we discussed about security by design, zero trust, ecosystem, so many things. And I think we have enough fodder for the next session.
I think, Mukul, if I can add to what
Yes,
Ramesh
yes,
just
please
mentioned,
go on.
India is going to be a 15 trillion economy by 2040, is what economists are calling out. If you're going to grow to a 15 trillion economy, which means that from 3.5 to 15, it's a 4x plus growth, which means that enterprises across banks, non-banking financial services, insurance, manufacturing, IT services organizations, pharma, I think India will continue to innovate and lead in every segment that you're looking at. When you grow at that pace, as a country, as we grow, the responsibility of the ecosystem is to make sure that we enable and empower the growth of organizations, and HDFC is leading that front because it's the 5th largest bank in the world, aspirational bank, and we're pleased to be participating in this great journey.
Amazing, amazing. I think both of you guys have summed it up so well that there is nothing for me to do now. Thanks once again. A lot of gratitude for sharing your thoughts. Ramesh,
thank you for
thanks
having
to
us
you.
here. Thank you. Really appreciate it.
And it's been a lovely, lovely discussion. Very insightful.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mukul. Thanks for
Got to
getting us
learn a
together.
lot. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.